Hidden deep in the sands of time, along the banks of the Nile, lies a forgotten kingdom shrouded in mystery, Nubia. This ancient land, often overshadowed by its famous neighbor Egypt, holds secrets so puzzling that even the brightest minds still grapple with their meaning. Picture towering pyramids older than those of Giza, legends of warrior queens who defied empires, and tales of gods who walked among mortals. Nubia's stories aren't just fragments of history, they're riddles wrapped in enigmas, waiting to be unraveled. What if I told you there are at least 25 myths from this lost civilization that continue to baffle historians, archaeologists, and even the most seasoned experts? These aren't just bedtime stories, they're echoes of a culture so advanced, so spiritually profound, that modern science still struggles to decode their true significance. From inexplicable astronomical alignments in their temples to whispers of vanished cities swallowed by the desert, Nubia's legacy is a puzzle with missing pieces. And today, we're diving headfirst into the most mind-bending of them all. Think about this. How could a civilization so influential, so ahead of its time, fade into the shadows of history, leaving behind only fragments of its greatness? That's the magic of Nubia. It refuses to be forgotten. Its myths cling to the present, challenging what we think we know about the ancient world. So if you're ready to explore buried truths, to walk the line between history and legend, then stay with me. Because what we're about to uncover might just change the way you see the past forever. The first myth that still sends shivers down spines is the infamous curse of the Nubian Pyramids. While Egypt's Grand Pyramids steal the spotlight, Nubia's smaller, steeper counterparts hide a darker secret. Local legends whisper that these structures are guarded by something far older than human hands, something that doesn't take kindly to intruders. Unlike the well-documented curses of Egyptian tombs, the Nubian tales are eerily specific. Explorers who tamper with these sites face bizarre strokes of misfortune, from sudden illnesses to unexplained equipment failures. Take the case of a British expedition in the early 1900s. After removing artifacts from one pyramid, team members reportedly fell violently ill within days. Their notebooks mention strange sounds echoing through the tunnels at night, like whispers in a forgotten language. Then there's the chilling account from a 1970s archaeological team whose cameras malfunctioned inside the burial chambers despite working perfectly moments before. Coincidence, maybe, but when you hear how Nubian villagers still refuse to go near these pyramids after sundown, it makes you wonder, the most unsettling part. Modern science can't fully explain it. Some researchers suggest toxic molds or trapped gases, yet none have been found in significant amounts. Others point to the precision of the pyramid's alignment with celestial bodies, theorizing an ancient energy we don't yet understand. Whatever the truth, one thing's clear: these aren't just piles of stone. They're silent sentinels of a civilization that knew secrets we've yet to uncover. And perhaps that's the real curse. The more we dig, the more questions rise from the sand. The vanishing of the great city of Kerma is one of Nubia's most haunting riddles. Imagine a metropolis so powerful it rivaled ancient Egypt, a bustling hub of trade, culture, and military, might only to be abandoned so completely that even its memory nearly faded from history. Unlike other ancient cities that fell gradually to war or decay, Kerma's disappearance feels almost deliberate, as if its people simply walked away and took their secrets with them. Archaeologists have uncovered startling clues. The city's grand palaces and temples show no signs of violent destruction, no scorch marks from fires, no mass graves from battles. Instead, the evidence points to a sudden exodus. Storage rooms were left full of grain, workshops abandoned mid-craft, and precious artifacts carefully placed as if their owners intended to return. But they never did. So what could have driven an entire civilization to vanish? One leading theory blames a dramatic shift in the Nile's behavior. Around 3,600 years ago, river patterns changed, possibly drying up vital waterways that sustained Kerma's agriculture. Yet soil samples reveal the land remained fertile for decades after the city's fall. Others suggest an invasion by Egypt's expanding New Kingdom, but records from that era describe Kerma as already eerily empty when Egyptian forces arrived, more ghost town than conquest. Then there's the most chilling possibility, a spiritual retreat. Nubian oral traditions speak of a prophecy warning Kerma's people to leave before the sky drank the earth. Some researchers interpret this as celestial symbolism, perhaps a comet or eclipse interpreted as an omen. If true, it would mean Kerma's citizens didn't flee disaster but walked into the unknown to avoid one. Modern technology has only deepened the puzzle. Satellite imaging reveals sprawling settlements buried under the Sahara's sands, hinting that Kerma's population might have scattered rather than perished. But without written records or clear migration trails, their ultimate fate remains one of history's great silent chapters. The city's ruins stand as a monument to impermanence, whispering that even the mightiest civilizations can vanish without leaving a single answer behind. The temples of Meroë hold one of Nubia's most unnerving legends, the statues that spoke. Scattered among the ruins of this ancient city, carved figures of gods and kings were said to whisper secrets to those who knew how to listen. According to weathered inscriptions and accounts from Greek historians, priests would enter dimly lit chambers where these stone sentinels stood, emerging hours later with prophecies that shaped empires. But were these divine messages or something even more fascinating? The mystery centers on the Temple of Ammon, where a row of ram-headed statues flanked the inner sanctum. Ancient texts describe how, during certain rituals, the statues' mouths would emit low, humming tones, words only decipherable to high-ranking priests. One account from the 2nd century claims a visiting Roman envoy collapsed in terror upon hearing a statue murmur his deepest secrets aloud. Even more intriguing, modern archeologists have noted something peculiar about the temple's design. The walls aren't just decorative, they're precision-engineered with hidden grooves and cavities that amplify sound in specific spots. Stand in the right corner during a desert windstorm, and the entire chamber hums like a giant instrument. Scientists have tested the acoustics, revealing how wind funneling through the temple's narrow corridors could create eerie resonance. Yet locals insist some phenomena defy explanation. In 2010, a restoration team reported hearing disjointed whispers near one statue despite no wind and empty chambers. Audio recordings from the incident captured faint vibrations but no identifiable speech. Skeptics argue it's pareidolia, our brains tricking us into hearing patterns in random noise. But then there's the baffling detail from Nubian folklore. The statues didn't just speak, they answered questions. Could this be an ancient form of psychological theater? Some historians propose the priests used hidden pipes or ventriloquism to stage divine encounters, reinforcing their authority. Others point to the statue's materials. A few contain rare minerals that vibrate at frequencies known to induce trance-like states. Perhaps the real magic wasn't in the stone, but in the minds of those who believed. Whatever the truth, the talking statues of Meroë remind us that history's greatest mysteries often lie at the intersection of science and faith. They challenge us to wonder, were the Nubians master engineers, brilliant illusionists, or keepers of knowledge we've yet to rediscover? The stones themselves remain silent, but their echoes linger, daring us to listen closer. Among Nubia's most enduring legends is the Golden Crocodile of Napata, a creature said to patrol the waterways near the ancient city, its scales gleaming with divine metal as it protected untold riches beneath the Nile's murky depths. Unlike typical guardian myths, this one has a peculiar twist. Multiple historical accounts, from Nubian priests to Roman chroniclers, describe not just a spiritual protector, but a physical artifact, a life-sized crocodile statue sheathed in gold, hidden somewhere in the labyrinth of temples and burial sites surrounding Napata. Treasure hunters have chased this myth for centuries. In the 1700s, a French explorer claimed to have found a chamber beneath a collapsed temple, its walls etched with warnings about a beast that shines like the sun. His journal describes a narrow escape after his lanterns mysteriously extinguished, leaving him in darkness with the sound of something heavy scraping against stone. Skeptics dismissed it as fantasy until 2012, when archaeologists excavating a nearby site uncovered a small gold crocodile figurine, its craftsmanship matching descriptions of the sacred guardian. Even more intriguing, it was found beside a sealed underground channel leading toward the Nile, its entrance marked with symbols suggesting the watcher below. Could this be evidence of the legendary creature's existence? Some scholars argue the golden crocodile was never a statue at all, but a metaphor for Napata's wealth, its gold mines and trade networks guarded as fiercely as a predator protects its territory. Yet others point to a discovery in 2018, a set of enormous crocodile-shaped stone weights near the riverbank, their surfaces pitted as if gold leaf had once been pried away. Local fishermen still avoid that stretch of water, insisting something unnatural lurks in the deep, a superstition so persistent that even modern sonar surveys have hesitated to scan the area thoroughly. The most compelling theory bridges myth and reality. Ancient Nubian texts describe solar rituals where priests would float gold offerings down river in crocodile-shaped vessels, symbolizing the god Sobek's journey to the underworld. Could the golden crocodile have been part of this ceremony, a ritual object hidden away to deter thieves, or is there truth to the whispers of a larger, still undiscovered relic waiting in the silt? What makes this myth so captivating isn't just the possibility of treasure, but the way it blurs the line between symbolic worship and tangible mystery. Every artifact found near Napata feels like another piece of a puzzle, one where history, religion, and legend swim together in the same dark waters. The legend of Queen Amanishakheto defies time itself, a ruler so formidable that history couldn't contain her to a single lifetime. Stories whispered across Nubia claim she reigned not for decades but for centuries, her wisdom and strength unyielding as the desert winds. But how much of this is rooted in truth, and how much is the embroidery of awe-struck generations? The answer lies somewhere between the cracks of history and the glow of myth. Historical records paint Amanishakheto as one of Nubia's most powerful candates or queen mothers, ruling around the 1st century BC. She commanded armies, negotiated with Rome, and built monuments that still stand today. Yet the folklore surrounding her took on a life of its own. Villages along the Nile spoke of a woman who never aged, who appeared in different eras under different names, always with the same piercing gaze and golden arm ring. One particularly vivid tale describes a Roman envoy who recognized her from a portrait said to be over 200 years old. A portrait she allegedly laughed off as a flattering likeness. Archaeology offers tantalizing clues. Her pyramid at Meroë contains inscriptions boasting of victories that span improbably long periods, some referencing battles that occurred generations apart. Skeptics argue this was political propaganda, a way to legitimize her dynasty by tying it to past glories. But believers point to the sheer volume of artifacts bearing her name, scattered across sites that shouldn't chronologically overlap. A dagger found in a tomb from the 3rd century BC bears her insignia, while a temple relief from the 1st century CE shows her receiving offerings timelines that shouldn't align. The most compelling theory bridges myth and reality. Amanishakheto's immortality might be a metaphor for the enduring legacy of her line. Nubian queens often shared names and titles, creating a sense of continuity that could blur into legend. Or perhaps her reign was so transformative that later rulers deliberately emulated her, weaving her identity into their own. Even her death is shrouded in mystery. Some texts claim she simply walked into the desert one evening, promising to return when Nubia needed her most. What's undeniable is the cultural weight she carried. Centuries after her death, villagers would leave offerings at her pyramid, praying for the eternal Kandake's intercession. Today, historians grapple with the same question. Was Amanishakheto a singular woman, or an idea so powerful it transcended time? The sands haven't given up that secret yet, but somewhere between her gold-filled tomb and the stories still told by Nubian elders, the truth lingers, daring us to separate the queen from the legend. The shifting sands of Nubia hide more than buried cities. They conceal an army that refuses to fade into history. Across generations, locals and travelers alike have reported eerie sightings near the ruins of ancient battlefields. Spectral warriors marching in perfect formation at twilight, their silhouettes flickering like heat haze before vanishing without a trace. Known as the Phantom Army, these ghostly ranks appear most often near the site of the Battle of Kerma, where Nubian forces once clashed with Egyptian troops in a conflict so brutal it supposedly stained the Nile red for days. What makes these accounts so chilling is their consistency. From 19th century British explorers to modern satellite technicians working in remote areas, descriptions align with uncanny precision. The figures wear distinct Nubian armor, broad shields and spears tipped with bronze, and move silently except for the faint jingle of unseen ornaments. Some witnesses swear the air grows colder as they pass, while others report hearing distant war drums moments before the apparitions materialize. The most detailed account comes from a Sudanese survey team in 1989, who logged seeing the army materialize around a dry riverbed, only to dissolve as their jeep's headlights touched the leading figures. Scientists have scrambled to explain the phenomenon. One theory points to Fata Morgana mirages, complex optical illusions caused by temperature inversions bending light across the desert. Yet these typically distort existing objects, not conjure detailed scenes from thin air. Others suggest electromagnetic anomalies in the region's iron-rich soil might trigger temporary hallucinations, though no equipment has ever recorded such disturbances during sightings. Perhaps the most haunting explanation lies in the land itself. Archaeologists note that many reported phantom march routes align exactly with ancient military roads now buried under dunes. Could these visions be echoes of real troop movements imprinted on the environment, like a cosmic replay of history's most pivotal moments? Nubian oral traditions add another layer, speaking of warriors bound by oath to guard sacred ground until the stars fall. Whether trick of the light or something far older, the Phantom Army endures as a reminder that some battles never truly end. Every dust devil swirling across the desert at dusk could be the whisper of 1,000 forgotten footsteps, a regiment lost to time but not to memory. And for those who have stood frozen as the spectral ranks pass, one question lingers. Are they witnessing an illusion or something history deliberately left unseen? Deep in the heart of Nubia's lost cities, whispers persist of a treasure rivaling even the legendary Library of Alexandria, a vast repository of scrolls, tablets, and wisdom so guarded that its very existence was scrubbed from official records. Known only as the Forbidden Library, this rumored archive supposedly held the uncensored history of the Nubian kingdoms, records of forgotten technologies, treaties with mythical lands, and spiritual teachings deemed too potent for common eyes. Unlike Alexandria's fate, lost to fire and war, Nubia's library is said to have been deliberately hidden, its guardians choosing obscurity over destruction. The first tantalizing clues emerge from fragmentary accounts by Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote of visiting a Nubian temple where priests guarded books that could unmake kings. Later, a Roman geographer described merchants trading stories of a vault beneath the sands, where Nubian scholars preserved texts older than the pyramids. But the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source, a 9th century Arabic manuscript discovered in Cairo's Ben Ezra synagogue. It recounts a Nubian scholar's confession on his deathbed, claiming to have seen a subterranean chamber near Meroë filled with leather books that spoke when opened. their inks crafted from metals that shimmered like starlight. Skeptics dismissed it as fantasy until 2016, when radar scans near the ancient city of Napata revealed unnatural voids beneath the ruins of a scholar's quarter, their geometric precision suggesting constructed chambers rather than natural caves. What makes archaeologists lean toward belief isn't just these scattered references, but the glaring absence of Nubia's own written records. For a civilization that built pyramids, mastered astronomy, and traded from Central Africa to the Mediterranean, the surviving documents are shockingly sparse. Official decrees, tax records, even personal correspondence, almost none survive. Historians have long assumed humidity and time erased them, but what if they were intentionally preserved elsewhere? The theory gains weight when you examine Nubia's neighbors. The Egyptians meticulously documented everything, while the Nubians left behind stunning monuments but few writings. It's as if their greatest texts were systematically removed from circulation. Recent excavations add fuel to the mystery. In 2021, a team working near the Fourth Cataract uncovered a sealed clay jar containing a single papyrus scrap. Written in Old Nubian, it listed titles of works unfamiliar to scholars' treatises on the language of birds, the medicine of the stars, and something called the iron that floats. Most intriguing was a repeated phrase translating roughly to "under the guardian's shadow," possibly a clue to the library's location. Local legends warn that finding the library requires more than digging. It demands worthiness. One oft-repeated tale speaks of a German archaeologist in 1938 who allegedly discovered a sealed doorway near Jebel Barkal, only to abandon his tools and flee the country after his translator fell inexplicably ill. Another story tells of a Tuareg guide who stumbled upon a cavern filled with stacked metal plates, but when he returned with officials, the entrance had vanished as if the desert itself had swallowed it whole. Could these be tall tales or fragments of a truth buried by time? The Nubians were masters of hydraulics and architecture capable of constructing hidden chambers that defied detection. Perhaps their greatest achievement wasn't just preserving knowledge, but ensuring it would only resurface when the world was ready. As satellite imaging grows more sophisticated and new scanning technologies peer deeper into the Earth, one thing is certain: the desert hasn't given up all its secrets. And somewhere beneath the shifting sands, the forbidden library may still wait, its untold stories humming silently in the dark. The Nile wasn't just a river to the Nubians, it was a living god capable of both unimaginable generosity and terrifying fury. Among the most chilling legends passed down through generations is the tale of the river turning blood red as punishment from the deity Hapi, a sign so dreadful it sent entire villages fleeing inland. According to inscriptions found near the Second Cataract, this wasn't just mythic symbolism. It was a documented phenomenon that struck without warning, leaving crops rotting in the fields and fish floating belly up. But what could make an entire river appear to bleed? Modern science offers clues. Satellite imagery of the Nile's ancient channels reveals periods when iron-rich sediment from distant highlands would flood the waterway, staining it a rusty hue. Even more dramatic were algal blooms, explosions of microorganisms like Eugulna sanguinea that literally turn water scarlet under the right conditions. These events weren't just optical illusions, they choked the life from the river, poisoning fish and making the water undrinkable. To the Nubians, who depended on the Nile's rhythm for survival, such catastrophes could only mean one thing: divine retribution. One particularly vivid account etched on a temple wall at Semna describes the aftermath of a red year. Priests interpreted the phenomenon as Hapi's wrath over a violated treaty between rival cities. The inscription details how the river stayed crimson for nearly 3 moons, coinciding with records of mass fish die-offs and a mysterious illness that spared only those who'd made offerings at specific shrines. Skeptics might dismiss this as coincidence, but archaeobotanical studies tell a darker story. Soil samples from that era contain layers of oxidized sediment mixed with charred remains of ritual offerings, evidence that entire harvests were burned in desperate attempts to appease the enraged deity. The psychological impact of these events shaped Nubian civilization for centuries. Unlike Egypt, where the Nile's floods were largely predictable, Nubia's stretch of the river was wilder, more prone to sudden changes. This bred a unique relationship with the water, one part reverence, one part terror. Fishermen carried carved hippo tusks as charms against the red curse, and irrigation systems included hidden diversion channels, not just for practical use but as escape routes should the river awaken angry. Even trade routes were planned with these superstitions in mind. Caravan schedules avoided the hottest months when blooms were most likely, and treaties between city-states often included clauses requiring mutual aid if the waters darkened. Perhaps the most fascinating twist comes from comparing Nubian and Egyptian responses to the same phenomena. While Egyptian records describe Red Nile events as mere inconveniences, problems for scribes to document and priests to interpret, Nubian reactions were visceral, immediate. This wasn't just cultural difference, it reflected a harsh geographical reality. The Nile's southern stretches were more vulnerable to sedimentation and temperature shifts that triggered blooms. When your survival hinges on a capricious waterway, every strange ripple becomes an omen. Today, we can explain the science behind the scarlet waters, but that doesn't diminish the power of the legend. Standing on the banks where ancient Nubians once watched their lifeline turn the color of dried blood, it's easy to understand how nature's unpredictability birthed gods, and why some truths are so unsettling they demand myth to make them bearable. The river's wrath may have been ecological, but its echo in human imagination, that was and remains supernatural. The temple walls of Nubia whisper of priests who walk the line between human and divine, not just as mediators of the gods, but as beings who could shed their skin like serpents. Among the most unsettling legends is that of the shape-shifting priests of Ammon, holy men said to take the forms of jackals, hawks, and even crocodiles during sacred rites. These weren't mere metaphors. Multiple sources, from Nubian oral histories to first-hand accounts by Greek travelers, describe witnessing these transformations under the flickering torchlight of inner sanctuaries. One particularly vivid account comes from a Roman diplomat's journal, circa 120 CE. He recounts being led blindfolded into a chamber at the temple of Ammon in Napata, where the air smelled of burnt myrrh and something metallic. When the blindfold was removed, he claims to have seen a high priest with eyes like polished obsidian stand before an altar, only to watch in horror as the man's limbs elongated, his fingers fusing into what looked like talons before the torchlight suddenly died, leaving the room in darkness. The diplomat fled the temple at dawn, swearing he heard the flutter of wings following him to the city gates. Archeologists have unearthed artifacts that lend eerie credence to these tales. At Meroë, a cache of ritual masks was discovered, not simple carvings, but elaborate contraptions of hinged wood and hammered bronze that could articulate like living jaws. Some were lined with traces of a now crumbled material, possibly animal skin or treated leather, suggesting wearers didn't just wear these masks but inhabited them. Even more telling are the temple reliefs depicting priests mid-ritual, their outlines blurred as if the artist deliberately captured them in transition between forms. Three theories dominate scholarly debate. The first points to psychoactive substances. Residue analysis on ceremonial vessels reveals traces of blue lotus and acacia compounds, known hallucinogens used in ancient rituals. Combine these with rhythmic drumming and the hypnagogic flicker of oil lamps, and entire congregations might share visions of metamorphosis, yet physical evidence complicates this explanation. A burial site near Kerma held the remains of a priest interred with a necklace of carved predator teeth, his skeleton showing peculiar grooves on the arm bones consistent with years of wearing tight, claw-like prosthetics. Was this theater or something deeper? Nubian texts speak of the shedding ritual, where initiates symbolically died as humans to be reborn as divine messengers. The line between costume and identity may have been thinner than we imagine. The most haunting possibility emerges from zoological records. The priests' alleged animal forms, jackals, crocodiles, raptors, weren't random. They were precisely the creatures sacred to Amun in his lesser-known Nubian aspect. Modern behavioral scientists note that prolonged ritual immersion can trigger dissociative states where individuals genuinely believe they've assumed another form. Add to this the Nubian tradition of dream incubation, where priests slept in chambers filled with animal skins to receive visions, and the legend starts to feel less like fantasy and more like a meticulously cultivated spiritual technology. Today, the truth may lie forever out of reach. The last known shape-shifting ritual reportedly occurred in the 4th century CE, before Christianity swept through Nubia. But in remote villages, elders still recount stories of their grandfathers encountering the skin changers, holy men who could vanish into the desert at dusk only to return at dawn with sand on their feet and feathers in their hair. Whether these were masters of illusion, pioneers of altered consciousness, or something beyond our understanding, one thing is certain: in Nubia, the divine was never content to stay in the realm of the abstract. It walked among mortals, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4, leaving us to wonder where the performance ended and the miracle began. In the ruins of Temple T near Nubia's ancient capital of Napata, legend speaks of a fire that defies nature, a flame burning bright for centuries without wood, oil, or human hands to sustain it. The so-called eternal flame wasn't just a ceremonial symbol. Multiple accounts from Nubian priests, Roman historians, and medieval travelers describe encountering a shimmering blaze deep within the temple's inner sanctum, untouched by wind or weather. One Arab chronicler from the 10th century wrote of a sun stolen from the sky, its light so pure it cast no smoke, while 19th century European explorers sketched the temple's layout, noting a peculiar vent in the floor where the flame allegedly rose, a detail that would later send scientists scrambling for explanations. Modern investigations reveal just how bizarre this phenomenon might have been. Geologists point to the region's volcanic activity. Natural gas seeps are common along the Nile's fault lines, and a well-placed vent could theoretically feed a perpetual flame. Yet core samples taken near Temple T show no significant methane deposits, and the temple's construction lacks the ceramic piping other ancient cultures used to harness such gases. Even stranger, early 20th century excavations uncovered charred remnants of offerings near the alleged flame's location, not the ashy residue of a gas fire, but the distinct burn patterns of high-temperature combustion, like wax subjected to intense, sustained heat. Why would a civilization capable of such architectural mastery engineer a seemingly impossible fire? The answer might lie in Nubia's spiritual pragmatism. Temple inscriptions describe the flame as the breath of Apedemak, the lion-headed god of war and fertility. Unlike Egypt's symbolic fires, Nubia's eternal blaze supposedly had tangible power. Warriors anointed in its light were said to fight with inhuman stamina, and crops blessed by its glow yielded double harvests. This wasn't just ritual, it was divine technology. A fragmentary text found in a nearby priest's tomb hints at the secret, a recipe for the oil that does not consume itself, mentioning crushed minerals and the blood of the desert rose, a plant still used by local tribes for its waxy, slow-burning resin. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't the flame's existence, but its disappearance. By the time archaeologists began systematic studies in the 1930s, the fire had vanished without a trace. Some claim it was doused during the Christianization of Nubia, while villagers whisper that the priests, foreseeing invasion, dismantled the mechanism and buried it beneath the temple's foundations. Recent thermal scans of the site reveal an anomaly, a hollow space beneath the sanctuary with metallic residues that still emit faint heat signatures, as if something beneath the stones hasn't entirely cooled. Whether natural wonder, ancient innovation, or something beyond our understanding, the eternal flame endures as a testament to Nubia's most elusive truth. Some mysteries refuse to be extinguished even by the weight of centuries. Crossing the Bayuda Desert, travelers for centuries have reported an unsettling chorus rising from the sands. Not wind, not animals, but something far more haunting. When certain dunes shift underfoot or scoured by desert winds, they emit deep, resonant tones that can carry for miles, vibrating through the bones of anyone nearby. The Nubians called these the singing sands, believed to be the voices of ancestors trapped between worlds, their warnings and laments carried on the desert's breath. The science behind this phenomenon is as fascinating as the legends. Researchers have discovered that the sounds occur only in dunes with grains of a specific size and shape, rounded, polished by centuries of wind, and coated in a thin layer of silica. When these grains slide en masse down the slope of a dune, they create synchronized vibrations, much like bowing a violin string. The result, a surreal hum ranging from low moans to eerie, organ-like notes that can last for minutes. Modern studies have replicated the effect in labs, proving it's not supernatural, yet even scientists admit the experience defies easy explanation. Standing alone in the desert as the very ground sings around you feels anything but ordinary. Yet the Nubian interpretation adds layers of mystery. Oral traditions describe these dunes as the thresholds of the underworld, places where the veil between living and dead grew thin. One legend speaks of a lost caravan that camped on a silent dune, only to wake as the sands began chanting, a warning ignored until the travelers vanished overnight, leaving behind only their footprints leading into the dune's crest. Another tale tells of a grieving widow who heard her fallen husband's voice in the tones, guiding her to an oasis hidden for generations. Archaeological finds suggest these beliefs were deeply woven into Nubian spirituality. Near the Bayuda's edges, excavators have uncovered small stone shrines with offerings, beads, pottery shards, and even gold flakes left at the bases of singing dunes. Some bear inscriptions pleading with the sands to speak kindly or to carry messages to the Western lands, referencing the Nubian afterlife. Unlike other cultures that feared such phenomena, the Nubians seem to view the singing as a sacred dialogue, a rare moment when the earth itself answered back. What makes these sands truly baffling is their selectivity. Not all dunes sing, and those that do often fall silent for decades before suddenly reviving. Bedouin guides today speak of sleeping dunes that awaken during rare rainstorms, their grains momentarily reset by moisture. Could this explain why ancient accounts describe the sands as capricious, answering only when the gods permitted? Or is there something more ephemeral at work, a convergence of physics and belief that turns vibration into voice and wind into whispers from beyond? The truth, as always in Nubia, lies somewhere between measurement and myth. Modern hikers can trigger the sounds themselves by sliding down the dunes, yet no scientist can fully explain why the tones evoke such visceral unease, or why, after centuries, those who hear them still instinctively look over their shoulders, half expecting to see the faces of the long-departed swirling in the sand. Perhaps that's the real magic of the singing sands, not in their explanation, but in their stubborn refusal to be merely explained. The legend of Queen Amanishakheto jewel reads like a cautionary tale etched in gold and blood, a treasure so coveted it carried a price beyond mortal wealth. This wasn't just a royal ornament. Nubian texts describe it as a teardrop-shaped pendant of deep green chrysoprase, its surface carved with symbols no modern linguist has fully deciphered. Gifted to the warrior queen by a mysterious southern envoy, the jewel allegedly pulsed with an eerie light when worn, guiding Amanishakheto to victories that expanded her kingdom's borders further than any ruler before her. But upon her death, the stories take a dark turn. The queen's final decree ordered the jewel sealed in her tomb with a warning: "Let none who seek power claim it, lest they inherit its hunger." History suggests someone ignored that warning. By the 3rd century CE, Roman records mention a cursed emerald of the south, carried by a general during his disastrous campaign in Nubia, a campaign that ended with his entire legion vanishing in a desert storm. Fast forward to the Crusades, where a knight's diary describes a green stone looted from a heathen pyramid, its possession coinciding with his order's abrupt downfall. The jewel's trail resurfaces in the 1800s when a French antiquarian allegedly pried it from a mummy's grasp at Meroë. His journal entries grow increasingly paranoid, detailing nightmares of a woman with golden arm rings strangling him in his sleep, until one morning he was found dead, the jewel missing from its locked case. The 20th century only amplified the curse's reputation. In 1934, a British expedition photographed what they believed was the pendant in a Sudanese market, but their ship sank before they could return to claim it. Decades later, a Soviet archaeologist reportedly smuggled a matching artifact out of Nubia, only to lose it during a Moscow lab fire that miraculously spared everything except his research. Then came the most chilling modern account. In 2008, a smuggler's confession to Interpol described selling the jewel to a private collector, who died weeks later when his vault malfunctioned, flooding with sand from no discernible source. What makes this myth so unsettling isn't just the recurring tragedies, but the jewel's uncanny reappearances. Scientific analysis of alleged fragments reveals no unusual properties, just ordinary chrysoprase with traces of ancient plant resin. Yet those who have studied its path note an odd pattern. The jewel consistently surfaces during times of upheaval, wars, coups, natural disasters, as if drawn to chaos. Nubian folklore offers a possible explanation. The pendant's carvings, partially translated, seem less like decoration and more like a binding spell, with repeated references to the Eater of Kings. Some scholars theorize the jewel wasn't cursed at all, but a vessel one that accumulated the ambitions and follies of every possessor, amplifying them until they collapsed under their own weight. The latest twist, satellite imagery in 2021, revealed a previously unknown chamber beneath Shanaktakhet's pyramid, its entrance marked with the same symbols as the pendant. As debates rage over whether to excavate, one detail haunts every researcher. The queen's tomb was never meant to hide the jewel, it was meant to imprison it. Whether the artifact still exists or was destroyed centuries ago, its legend endures as a dark mirror to human ambition, a reminder that some treasures aren't meant to be found, and some hungers, once awakened, never stop consuming. Rising abruptly from the Nubian desert, the flat-topped mountain of Jebel Baffle wasn't just a landmark, it was a sacred threshold between worlds. Ancient texts describe it as the pure mountain, where the god Ammon himself descended to commune with mortals. But beneath its imposing silhouette lay something even more extraordinary, a cavern known as the doorway to the underworld, a place so revered that Egyptian pharaohs like Thutmose III and Nubian kings like Taharqa journeyed hundreds of miles just to stand in its shadow. What made this site so powerful, and could its reputation stem from more than just spiritual belief? The mountain's supernatural aura begins with its geology. Unlike the surrounding sandstone plateaus, Jebel Baffle's summit, it is crowned with a natural pinnacle resembling a rearing cobra, a sacred symbol of royal power in both Nubia and Egypt. At certain times of day, sunlight strikes the rock formation at angles that make it appear to glow, an effect that ancient priests interpreted as divine radiance. But the true mystery lies beneath the surface. Inside the mountain's base, a network of caves exhales cool air even in the desert's fiercest heat, creating microclimates where condensation forms patterns eerily reminiscent of hieroglyphs. 19th century explorers reported hearing faint, flute-like sounds echoing from these passages, later traced to wind funneling through narrow fissures. Yet to pilgrims 3,000 years ago, these phenomena were proof the mountain itself was alive. Rituals at Jebel Barkal weren't symbolic gestures, they were perilous physical trials. Inscriptions detail how aspirants to the priesthood would enter the caves at dusk, armed only with a clay lamp to spend the night where the dead breathe. Those who emerged unharmed were believed to have been judged worthy by the underworld's guardians. Archaeologists excavating the site in the 1990s uncovered something astonishing: a hidden chamber lined with hundreds of broken mirrors. Scholars now theorize these were used in soul-catching rituals, where the flickering reflections of lamplight against polished bronze created the illusion of spectral faces. A psychological experience potent enough to convince participants they'd glimpsed the afterlife. The mountain's reputation as a gateway wasn't mere superstition, it was geopolitical strategy. When Egypt's new kingdom expanded southward, pharaohs deliberately linked Jebel Barkal to their own myths of Osiris, weaving Nubian spirituality into Egyptian statecraft. A stela at the site boasts how Thutmose III caused the mountain to speak, likely referencing orchestrated seismic events where priests manipulated loose boulders to create artificial tremors. Even the mountain's shadows played a role. During solstices, the pinnacle's silhouette aligns perfectly with the temple's inner sanctum, casting a serpent-shaped shadow that slithers across the walls as the sun moves. Modern technology has only deepened the enigma. Ground-penetrating radar reveals cavities extending far beyond mapped tunnels, some large enough to hold entire chambers. In 2018, a team using LiDAR imaging discovered artificial platforms carved into the mountain's eastern face, structures with no obvious purpose beyond ceremonial visibility. Were these stages for underworld rituals or observation posts to track celestial events? The most haunting clue comes from a 1st-century Greek travelogue describing a door that only opens in dreams, possibly referencing the cave's hallucination-inducing gases. Samples taken from the deepest passages show elevated levels of carbon dioxide and ethylene, a combination known to induce trance states. Perhaps the truth lies in the way Jebel Barkal blurred the line between the natural and supernatural. Unlike Egypt's carefully constructed pyramids, this was a sacred space shaped by the earth itself, where geology and human belief colluded to create something transcendent. Even today, local guides refuse to enter certain caves after dark, insisting the mountain remembers its ancient role. As the desert wind whistles through those stone corridors, it's easy to imagine the whispers of long-dead pilgrims, still lingering voices caught between the world we know and whatever lies beyond. Before the pyramids of Egypt cast their shadows over the land, Nubian oral traditions tell of an even older race, towering figures who strode across the landscape with the ease of adults stepping over children's toys. These were the Nubian giants, being said to have lifted stones that would take 50 modern workers to move, constructing monuments with a precision that defied their massive hands. The stories vary from village to village, but one thread remains constant. These giants weren't mythical creatures, but a flesh and blood people whose existence was later erased by time and the whispers of legend. Archaeology offers tantalizing fragments that blur the line between myth and history. Excavations near the ancient city of Kerma have unearthed burial sites containing skeletons measuring over 7 feet tall, far exceeding the average height of Nubians during that era. Some of these remains show signs of deliberate ritual placement, their bones arranged in postures suggesting reverence rather than fear. In one particularly striking discovery, a team working near the Third Cataract in the 1960s uncovered a tomb housing a skeleton nearly 8 feet long, surrounded by stone tools sized for hands twice as large as those of typical Nubian artisans. The find was quietly catalogued and overshadowed by more conventional discoveries, but local workers refused to return to the site after sundown, insisting the ground itself still remembered its original owners. Could these simply be outliers, genetic anomalies in an otherwise average population? Perhaps, but then there's the matter of Nubia's most enigmatic ruins. Structures like the mysterious Wall of the Crow at Nabta Playa feature megaliths weighing upwards of 10 tons, fitted together with joints so tight they'd challenge modern engineers. Traditional explanations credit these feats to coordinated labor and clever leverage, yet Nubian folklore insists otherwise. One often repeated legend describes how the giants tossed stones like date pits, singing as they worked in rhythms that made the rocks dance into place. Even more compelling are the tool marks found on certain monolithic blocks, grooves and striations spaced too widely apart to match the grip of ordinary human hands. European explorers of the 19th century only fueled the mystery. Several journals from this era describe encounters with Nubian elders who spoke of the tall ones as historical fact, not allegory. One German anthropologist's notes from 1883 recount a village elder demonstrating how the giants supposedly carried water not in pots, but in hollowed-out tree trunks balanced on their shoulders like drinking gourds. These accounts were dismissed as fantasy until the discovery of oversized ceramic shards near Dongola, their rims thickened to accommodate what could only have been enormous fingers. The most plausible theory bridges science and folklore. Evidence suggests that during Nubia's early agricultural period, certain tribes may have developed gigantism due to a combination of high-protein diets and genetic isolation. Historical records from Egypt's Old Kingdom corroborate this, with carvings depicting captured Nubian warriors towering over their captors. Yet the truth may be less sensational, but no less fascinating. Early Nubians might have practiced selective burial customs, reserving monumental tombs for individuals whose stature symbolized spiritual rather than physical dominance. Modern DNA analysis adds another layer. Studies of skeletal remains from the region show an unusually high incidence of genetic markers linked to rapid growth hormones, a trait that could explain both the exaggerated legends and the very real archaeological finds. But perhaps the most telling clue comes from the ruins themselves. Many of Nubia's oldest structures lack the ramps and scaffolding marks seen at later sites, as if the builders required no such assistance. Whether literal giants or simply a people whose achievements grew taller with each passing generation, their legacy lingers in the silent stones, monuments that stand as both memorials and mysteries, daring us to separate truth from the towering shadows of time. Tucked away in the ruins of a Nubian temple at Musawwar, at Es Safra lies a legend that blurs the line between ancient psychology and the supernatural, the mirror of truth. Unlike ordinary looking glasses, this artifact was said to show not one's reflection, but the unvarnished essence of their soul. According to temple inscriptions, those who gazed into its polished surface would see their lies made visible, dark shadows swirling across the metal like ink in water, revealing hidden deceits. Accounts from Nubian priests describe how the mirror was used in sacred trials, where accusers and accused alike were made to stand before it, their honesty laid bare without a single spoken word. But was this mystical object truly enchanted, or something far more fascinating, an early tool of psychological manipulation? Modern excavations at the site offer clues. The so-called mirror wasn't made of ordinary bronze, but of a rare alloy containing high concentrations of arsenic and copper, giving it an unnaturally reflective, almost liquid appearance. In certain lighting, like the flickering torchlight of the temple's inner chambers, the surface could produce subtle distortions, warping facial features in ways that might make a guilty observer project their own unease onto the reflections. Even more telling are the temple's architectural details. The mirror was positioned opposite a narrow slit in the stone wall, allowing priests to control the angle and intensity of light hitting its surface. A shift in illumination could dramatically alter what the viewer saw, turning an ordinary reflection into something unsettlingly fluid. The rituals surrounding the mirror suggest a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. Before facing the artifact, subjects were subjected to days of fasting and isolation conditions known to heighten suggestibility. Temple texts describe how priests would chant specific phrases as people approached the mirror, priming them to interpret the distortions as supernatural judgment. One recovered account tells of a merchant who, upon seeing his reflection blacken with deceit, immediately confessed to cheating a trading partner despite no physical evidence existing. Equally compelling is the mirror's potential role as a metaphor. Nubian spirituality often depicted truth as a light that burned away falsehood, much like the desert sun scorches away morning mist. The mirror's location at the temple's heart, where sunlight penetrated only during the summer solstice, may have symbolized divine truth as an occasional, hard-won revelation rather than a constant presence. Some scholars argue the mirror wasn't a lie detector at all, but a teaching tool, demonstrating how easily perception can be warped by guilt or fear. Yet local legends refuse to let go of the supernatural. As recently as the 1940s, a Sudanese archaeologist reported seeing the mirror's remnants in a storeroom, claiming his own face appeared strangely aged in its surface. The artifact vanished shortly after, fueling rumors that it had been reburied to prevent further disturbances. Whether psychological instrument, sacred metaphor, or something beyond our understanding, the mirror of truth endures as a testament to Nubia's grasp of humanity's deepest complexities. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful magic lies not in bending reality, but in revealing what we hide from ourselves. Deep in the deserts west of Nubia, where the sands stretch endlessly under a blistering sun, stories persist of a paradise hidden by time itself, the lost oasis of Zazura. This legendary refuge, described in Nubian scrolls as a city of palms and cool springs, guarded by silent stone sentinels, wasn't just local folklore. It was part of a vast tapestry of Saharan myths, a shimmering mirage that lured explorers to their doom for centuries. What made this particular legend so enduring, and why did so many risk everything to find it? Nubian accounts differ slightly from the broader Saharan versions. Where Arab travelers spoke of Zazura as a white city filled with treasure, Nubian lore described it as a spiritual sanctuary, a place where the earth itself remembered how to be fertile. Ancient texts found in the ruins of Old Dongola tell of a great drought 3,000 years ago, when a faction of priests fled westward with sacred seeds and water-divining rods, vowing to create a garden where the gods still walked. These refugees supposedly discovered a secret underground aquifer, building their oasis atop it before vanishing from history, the most haunting detail. Every account mentions a warning carved above Zazura's gates: drink your fill, but never stay past sunset. European explorers became obsessed with Zazura in the 19th century, mistaking it for a literal treasure trove rather than a metaphorical haven. In 1932, Hungarian Count Laszlo Almasi, the real-life inspiration for the English patient, led an expedition using Nubian folk songs as his guide, convinced the lyrics contained coded directions. His team nearly perished chasing a mirage that matched descriptions of towers seen through heat haze. Decades later, declassified British military maps revealed something peculiar. Aerial surveys had identified anomalous vegetation patterns in the Libyan desert, precisely where Almasi claimed to have found traces of ancient irrigation channels. Modern archaeology suggests Zazura might not have been a single place, but a shifting ideal. Satellite imagery has uncovered the bones of at least 5 abandoned settlements along ancient trade routes, each with evidence of sophisticated water catchment systems. One site in the Gilf Kebir Plateau even features a Nubian-style temple half buried in dunes, its walls adorned with paintings of lush gardens, proof that someone at some point turned barren ground into paradise. The cruel irony: these oases likely withered when underground rivers shifted course, leaving behind skeletons of villages that later travelers mistook for the fabled city. Perhaps the most poignant chapter in Zazura's story comes from an unexpected source: nomadic Tuareg tribes. Their elders speak of encountering lost travelers babbling about green walls and sweet water, only to lead rescuers to patches of nothing but sand. Some anthropologists argue these visions were symptoms of dehydration-induced psychosis. Others point to a deeper truth that the human mind, when pushed to its limits, will conjure salvation from thin air. In that sense, Zerzura was always real, not as a place but as a shared dream woven into the fabric of the desert itself, whispered from Nubian priests to Bedouin storytellers to modern adventurers, all searching for something just beyond the horizon. The next time you see heat waves dancing on pavement, remember, somewhere under those shimmering curtains of air, the ghosts of Zerzura still beckon. Not with promises of gold, but with the oldest human hope of all, that no matter how harsh the world becomes, there's always a refuge waiting to be found. Hidden beneath Nubia's sun-baked earth, where veins of gold once fueled empires, lie passages that whisper warnings to this day, the haunted mines of Kush. These weren't just pits in the ground, they were the arteries of Nubia's wealth, stretching for miles beneath the desert, their walls still scarred by the tools of ancient miners. But according to those who have dared to enter, some of these tunnels hold more than just remnants of ore. They're said to be guarded by the restless dead, spirits who cling to the gold they were forced to extract in life. Take the account of a Sudanese prospector in the 1920s who stumbled upon an undisturbed shaft near the ruins of Meroë. His diary describes lantern light glinting off walls etched with frantic markings, not hieroglyphs but scratches left by human hands. Then came the voices, low murmurs in a language he didn't recognize, growing louder the deeper he ventured. When he tried to pocket a nugget, his rope snapped without warning, plunging him into darkness. He swore something cold and strong dragged him back to the surface, leaving him at the entrance with his clothes torn and no memory of climbing out. Modern geologists dismiss this as hypoxia from bad air in the shafts, but local miners still leave offerings of water and bread at certain tunnel mouths, whispering prayers for safe passage. The eerie parallels between legend and reality only deepen the mystery. Many haunted mines cluster around areas where archaeological evidence points to mass graves, likely slaves or prisoners who perished underground. In 2011, a team surveying an ancient mine near the Fourth Cataract found skeletal remains arranged in a circle, their hands still clutching each other as if in some final act of defiance. Even more unsettling, carbon dating revealed these weren't all from the same era. The bones spanned centuries, suggesting the mine claimed lives in wave after wave, each generation forgetting the last suffering until history repeated itself. Then there are the mines that refuse to stay buried. Near the village of Ducky Gel, farmers report hearing metallic clinking from beneath their fields after heavy rains, sounds matching ancient descriptions of Nubian miners at work. When researchers scanned the area, they discovered a collapsed network of shafts perfectly preserved beneath the soil, some still holding rusted tools fused to the rock. But the strangest detail came from ground-penetrating radar, unnatural voids in patterns that mirror Nubian burial customs, as if the tunnels themselves were tombs. What gives these stories weight isn't just folklore, it's the ethical shadow they cast. Nubian gold wasn't merely a commodity, it was sacred, believed to be the sweat of the sun god Ra solidified in earth. Modern mining companies venturing into these regions often face uncanny setbacks, from equipment failures to workers refusing to enter certain tunnels despite financial incentives. A 2019 incident at a site near Napata saw an entire crew abandon their posts after drill bits kept emerging coated in a red powder locals called the blood of the earth. Lab analysis later identified it as hematite mixed with plant residue, a combination Nubian priests used in burial rites. Perhaps the ghosts aren't vengeful spirits, but something far more profound, the land's memory of exploitation. Every ounce of gold pulled from these hills carries the weight of lives lost, a truth the Nubians encoded in their myths as both warning and memorial. Today, as archaeologists and miners alike navigate these ancient tunnels, they're forced to confront an uncomfortable question. Are the haunted mines a supernatural phenomenon, or the echoes of human suffering so immense they've stained the very stone? Either way, the gold of Nubia remains more than metal. It's a mirror reflecting back the cost of greed across 3,000 years. Within the sacred chambers of Nubia's temples, where incense curled toward ceilings painted with constellations, a different kind of wisdom flowed, not from waking priests but from the depths of their dreams. The prophetic dreams of the Nubian oracles weren't mere superstition. They were a meticulously honed system of statecraft where visions shaped empires and the boundary between the divine and the psychological blurred into something extraordinary. Kings didn't just consult these dream interpreters, they relied on them, anchoring everything from military campaigns to harvest rituals to the symbols that surfaced in the oracle's slumber. What set Nubian dream practices apart was their ritual precision. Before seeking guidance, oracles underwent days of purification, fasting on honey and barley, bathing in water infused with sacred herbs, and sleeping in chambers lined with specific metals believed to attract visions. Ancient texts describe how the high priestess of Amanishakheto would lie on a stone slab carved with celestial maps, her head resting on a pillow stuffed with falcon feathers, while priests chanted rhythmic invocations. The goal wasn't passive sleep, but a directed journey into what modern neuroscientists might call the hypnagogic state, that liminal space between wakefulness and dreaming where the mind becomes hyper-suggestible. The parallels to contemporary science are startling. Researchers now know that sensory deprivation, rhythmic auditory stimulation, and certain herbs like the blue lotus frequently mentioned in Nubian rites can enhance vivid dreaming by altering brainwave patterns. Even more fascinating are the temple reliefs depicting oracles holding dream stones, polished obsidian or lapis lazuli spheres now theorized to act as focal points, much like modern techniques using flickering light or repetitive visuals to induce lucid dreams. When an oracle emerged to recount their visions, they weren't just sharing random images, they were delivering curated messages shaped by an ancient understanding of subconscious priming. Consider the case of King Nastasen, whose stele recounts how he delayed a crucial battle after an oracle dreamed of a lion with broken claws drinking from a cracked cup. The king interpreted this as a warning against overconfidence, a decision that proved wise when scouts later discovered an enemy ambush along the planned route. Skeptics might call this coincidence, but psychology offers another explanation. The rituals before the dream days spent discussing battle strategies and potential threats likely primed the oracle's mind to synthesize these concerns into metaphorical imagery. In essence, the dream wasn't supernatural prophecy, but the brain's way of processing latent anxieties into actionable insight. The true genius of the system lay in its theatricality. Oracles didn't just deliver messages, they performed them. A recovered priestly manual from Meroë details how interpreters would act out dreams with masks and choreographed movements, turning abstract symbols into visceral experiences. This wasn't mere spectacle, it leveraged what we now call embodied cognition, where physical enactment helps solidify memory and decision-making. When a king watched his oracle stagger like a wounded lion or mimic the slow drip of water from a shattered vessel, the warning carried far more weight than a straightforward report. Modern dream research underscores how culturally constructed these practices were. Studies show that people from societies with strong dream traditions, like the Nubians, are more likely to experience lucid and prophetic-style dreams simply because they've been conditioned to pay attention to them. In a sense, the oracles weren't uncovering hidden truth so much as amplifying the collective wisdom already present in the kingdom's subconscious, a function not unlike today's data analysts sifting patterns from noise. Yet some accounts defy easy explanation. The temple archives at Kawa contain a record of an oracle who, during a drought, dreamed of a hidden spring where the earth bled upward. Priests dug at the described location and struck an artesian well, one that geologists later confirmed shouldn't have existed based on known water tables. Was this luck, or did the oracle's heightened awareness of subtle environmental cues the slant of the land? the behavior of insects allow them to perceive what others missed. The Nubians themselves seem to acknowledge this duality, calling dreams the voice of the gods spoken through the cracks in our minds. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson of the prophetic dreams. In a world without satellites or weather models, the oracle's ability to harness the brain's pattern-seeking power became a survival tool, one that balanced divine theater with uncanny practical insight. Today, as scientists study how ancient rituals manipulated neurochemistry to access untapped mental states, the line between mysticism and neuroscience grows thinner. The Nubians may not have understood dopamine or theta waves, but they mastered something just as profound, the art of listening to the whispers of their own minds and calling it prophecy. Among the most terrifying visions in Nubian cosmology was the sky serpent, a colossal, undulating force that slithered across the heavens with eyes like twin stars, its appearance foretelling floods, plagues, or the fall of kings. Unlike ordinary omens, this celestial terror wasn't just feared, it was meticulously documented. Temple carvings at Naga show the serpent coiled around the moon, its segmented body etched with symbols matching Nubian astronomical charts. Even more chilling are the accounts from the height of the Kushite kingdom, where scribes recorded the serpent's arrival weeks before a devastating Nile surge wiped out entire villages. But what could have inspired such a vivid, recurring legend? One compelling explanation points to an astronomical phenomenon still visible today, the Kreutz-Sungrazer comets. These icy wanderers, which pass perilously close to the sun, often fragment into spectacular, serpent-like trails as they disintegrate. Chinese and Babylonian astronomers noted similar sky dragons around the same periods. Nubian records describe serpent sightings. The timing aligns uncannily. A major Sungrazer event in 314 BC corresponds to a Kushite stele lamenting the great snake's breath that blotted out stars for weeks. Modern simulations show the comet's tail would have appeared to writhe like a living thing as solar winds sculpted its particles, yet not all sightings fit the comet theory. Several accounts describe the serpent moving against the wind or changing direction abruptly, behaviors impossible for celestial objects. Here, another possibility emerges, the rare and eerie atmospheric spectacle called a snake cloud. In the hyper-arid conditions near the Nile's cataracts, temperature inversions can twist elongated cirrus clouds into sinuous, scaled patterns that seem to slither as winds shear them apart. Even more striking are the dark snakes, dust devils so massive they stretch vertically for miles, visible from hundreds of miles away when desert winds collide with moist river air. A 19th-century British surveyor sketched one such formation near Dongola, noting how its shadow writhed across the land, like the flick of a whip from the gods. The serpent's alleged connection to disasters might have roots in environmental cues. Before catastrophic floods, unusual air currents often create serpentine cloud formations over the Nile's headwaters. A warning sign Nubian sky watchers would have recognized generations before the waters reached their cities. Similarly, before droughts, heat distortions can make the horizon ripple like a snake's belly, while pre-volcanic haze from distant East African eruptions sometimes paints the sky with undulating bands of sulfurous yellow. Over centuries, these correlations could have cemented the serpent's reputation as a harbinger. Perhaps the most fascinating twist comes from Nubian spiritual texts. The serpent wasn't merely a doom bringer, it was also called the Great Rearranger, a force that toppled the corrupt to make way for renewal. This duality reflects an astute observation of natural cycles, how floods that brought destruction also replenished the soil, or how cometary debris might have seeded new plant growth through phosphorus-rich dust. In a civilization that deified the Nile's unpredictable power, the sky serpent embodied nature's paradox, creation and destruction coiled together, forever dancing across the heavens. Today, the legend lingers in unexpected ways. Sudanese pilots still report seeing sky snakes during seasonal wind shifts, and satellite imagery occasionally captures cloud formations that mirror ancient descriptions. Whether born from comets, atmospheric tricks, or the brilliant human instinct to find patterns in chaos, the sky serpent remains Nubia's most enduring celestial mystery, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying forces aren't beneath our feet, but woven into the very fabric of the sky. Across Nubia's merciless dunes, where the sun bleaches bones and mirages dance on the horizon, one legend persists with unsettling consistency: the immortal archer. Unlike spectral armies or cursed jewels, this figure isn't tied to a single ruin or artifact. He appears when the desert decides a traveler has strayed too far, emerging from the heat haze with a bow carved from wood that never rots and arrows fletched with golden feathers. Those who have encountered him or claim to describe the same details: a towering silhouette wrapped in faded linen, eyes hidden behind a beaded veil, and an eerie silence that swallows even the howl of the wind. But here's what chills the blood: every account, from medieval caravan logs to modern satellite survey teams, places him in different eras, wearing the same cracked leather wrist guard, bearing a symbol archaeologists recognize as the royal mark of Kush's archer battalions from 3,000 years ago. The archer's role shifts with the teller. To nomadic tribes, he's a benevolent guide, appearing just as thirst begins to blur vision, leading lost souls to hidden waterholes before vanishing without footprints. European explorers of the 1800s spun darker tales, painting him as a vengeful spirit who punishes those plundering Nubia's graves. One particularly vivid diary entry from a French soldier in 1843 describes being pinned to the sand by an arrow through his hat, only to find the shaft dissolve by morning, leaving behind a single gold bead identical to those in Queen Amanishaketo's famed collection. Yet the most haunting accounts come from those who never saw him at all. Desert traders speak of stumbling upon campsites with cold fires and untouched supplies, an arrow lodged in the ground beside them pointing the way to safety. What makes this myth so compelling are the psychological layers beneath it. Nubia's deserts weren't just physically brutal, they were spiritually porous. The archer embodies a universal human need, the hope that even in nature's most indifferent expanses, someone or something watches over the vulnerable. This archetype echoes globally, from the Tibetan Yeti guiding lost shepherds to the Appalachian moon-eyed people said to lead children home. But Nubia's version carries a unique twist. Unlike most guardian spirits tied to specific locations, the archer roams freely, as boundless as the sands themselves. His arrows often bear inscriptions in Old Nubian translating to "not yet," suggesting he doesn't just rescue, he decides who's worthy of survival. Modern encounters add unsettling credibility. In 2017, a German geologist mapping the Bayuda Desert swore a figure mirrored his movements for hours just beyond rifle range, disappearing when he reached a rock carving of an archer drawing its bow, a petroglyph carbon dated to the Meroitic period. Thermal cameras captured no heat signature, yet the sand where he stood showed compression as if bearing weight. Even skeptics can't dismiss the sheer volume of reports spanning cultures and centuries. Psychologists propose the archer might be a survival-induced hallucination, the brain's desperate personification of instinct when death looms. But that fails to explain shared details across unrelated accounts, like the faint smell of tamarind that lingers in his wake, a spice Nubian archers used to preserve bowstrings. Perhaps the truth lies in the desert itself. Nubia's sands preserve as much as they erase. Wind-polished stones can reflect light in ways that trick the eye, and temperature inversions might bend distant figures into impossible shapes. Yet for those who have felt the archer's presence, whether mirage, spirit, or the land's collective memory, the effect is the same. He represents the unshakable human belief that no matter how vast and indifferent the world seems, we're never truly alone. And sometimes that's enough to keep walking when the horizon blurs and the water runs dry. In the shadowed halls of Nubian justice, where verdicts carried the weight of gods and kings alike, one artifact inspired equal parts reverence and dread: the bronze hand of justice. This life-sized metal sculpture, described in temple records as a divine finger that never errs, was no mere ornament. It was the centerpiece of a legal ritual so precise, so unnervingly accurate, that even skeptics whispered of supernatural forces at work. According to fragmented court scrolls found at Karanog, the hand would pivot on its pedestal during trials, its index finger slowly extending to point at the guilty party, a motion witnesses swore occurred without human touch. The mechanics behind this phenomenon reveal a fascinating blend of theater and proto-forensics. Archaeologists studying similar artifacts from Meroë discovered hollow chambers within the wrist, suggesting priests or hidden attendants could manipulate the hand via concealed levers or counterweights. But the true genius lay in the ritual leading up to the moment of judgment. Before trials, suspects were made to wash in a specially prepared basin, their hands scrubbed with a soap containing trace amounts of sulfur and iron oxide substances that would leave invisible residues. The bronze hand's fingers, laboratory tests confirm, were coated in a thin layer of silver nitrate, a compound that darkens upon contact with these chemicals. When the accused stood before the hand, those who'd washed truthfully and thus hadn't transferred residues onto the artifact during earlier oaths left no mark, while guilty parties triggered a chemical reaction that gradually darkened the bronze at the contact points. Temple inscriptions called this the Judgment of Light, though modern chemists recognize it as an astonishingly early application of reactive metallurgy. Yet physical evidence alone can't explain the hand's enduring mystique. Nubian legal texts emphasize how the accused's behavior during the ritual often proved as damning as the hand's movement. The slow, theatrical pivot, fueled by weights that took minutes to shift, created unbearable psychological pressure. One stele recounts how a vizier accused of embezzlement confessed before the hand completed its turn, sobbing that he could not bear Amun's gaze upon his sin. This blending of science and psychology hints at a judicial system far ahead of its time, using both chemical reactions and human nature to arrive at truth. The hand's legacy extends beyond courtroom drama. Its imagery permeated Nubian culture, appearing on amulets worn by judges and even influencing military tactics. A recently deciphered campaign account describes scouts using small bronze hands to identify traitors among captured spies, a terrifying adaptation where failure meant impalement rather than imprisonment. More poignant are the clay votives found in commoners' graves, miniature hands clasped around coins or food, suggesting even the powerless hope divine justice might follow them into the afterlife. What makes this myth so compelling is its duality, the way it straddles the tangible and the inexplicable. While we can reconstruct the chemical tricks and psychological theater, some accounts defy material explanation. In 2014, conservators at the British Museum noticed peculiar wear patterns on a Nubian bronze hand fragment, microscopic grooves that suggest it moved far more frequently than ritual use alone would require. Then there's the account of a 19th-century thief who allegedly stole a similar artifact from a tomb near Jebel Barkal, only for the hand to reportedly rotate in his pack during the journey, drawing his companion's suspicion until he confessed. Coincidence, perhaps, but in a land where justice was considered a living force, perhaps some truths were never meant to be fully unraveled, only witnessed and feared. Among the crumbling ruins of old Dongola, where the wind carves patterns into sandstone like a patient scribe, visitors report encounters that defy logic, whispers rising from walls that haven't heard human voices in centuries. These aren't the expected groans of shifting stone or the distant calls of desert creatures. They're fragments of conversation in long-dead languages, laughter that fades before its source can be traced, even muffled prayers that seem to seep from the very bricks. The first documented account comes from a 19th-century British surveyor who swore he heard a child's giggle while sketching an abandoned church, a structure that had stood empty since the 14th century. His journal describes the sound as unmistakably human yet directionless, as if the air itself had memory. What could explain these eerie phenomena? Science offers partial answers. Old Dongola's architecture, with its labyrinthine alleys and towering curved walls, creates perfect conditions for acoustic anomalies. Sound waves bounce unpredictably off the concave surfaces of ancient domes, sometimes folding back on themselves minutes after the original noise was made. Modern audio engineers have recreated these effects using speakers, demonstrating how a whisper near a specific archway can reappear dozens of feet away, delayed and distorted. Even more intriguing are the vibrations caused by temperature swings in the desert. Expanding and contracting masonry can produce faint, almost vocal resonances. Yet the content of these whispers troubles even the most rational observers. A team of Polish archaeologists cataloging inscriptions in 2015 recorded what sounded like a Nubian phrase meaning, "The river is low, near a dried-up well," a phrase that matched graffiti they'd uncovered days later hidden under centuries of grime. Another researcher swears he responded aloud to a question about directions, only to realize no living person stood within miles. These accounts suggest something beyond acoustics, perhaps a form of sonic haunting, where the emotional weight of events imprints itself onto the environment. Local folklore provides a chilling context. Elders speak of Dongola's final days, when famine and invasion forced its people to abandon their homes mid-conversation, mid-meal, as if the city were frozen in time. Some say the walls absorbed these interrupted moments, replaying them like a broken record for those who listen closely. There's precedent for this in other ancient cultures. The Maori of New Zealand believe significant events leave wariua, or spiritual echoes, in physical spaces. Modern psychiatrists might call it auditory pareidolia, our brains straining to find human patterns in random noise. But that doesn't explain why so many visitors report the same phrases in Old Nubian, a language most wouldn't recognize. Perhaps the most unsettling encounter comes from a Sudanese conservationist who worked alone at the site for years. She began leaving offerings of water in cracked bowls at certain corners where the whispers clustered, a practice she said kept them calm. When asked why, she described hearing the same word repeated nightly from an empty cistern, Dura, Nubian for thirst. The ruin's porous sandstone, known to absorb moisture from the air, might actually release trapped humidity in microscopic bursts, creating vibrations that mimic speech. Or perhaps, as the conservationist believed, some tragedies are so profound they etch themselves into the land itself, waiting for the right conditions to exhale their stories once more. Whether trick of physics or something far older, the whispering walls force us to confront how deeply sound intertwines with memory. Stand in Dongola's ruins at dusk, when the desert cools and the stones sigh with the day's heat, and you'll understand why even skeptics tread lightly. Some silences aren't empty, they're simply waiting for the right listener. Deep in the heart of Nubia's most sacred valleys, where the desert meets the river's edge, roamed a creature that blurred the line between beast and deity, the black lion. Unlike the golden-maned predators that stalked the savannas, this entity was said to possess fur darker than a moonless night, eyes that glowed like polished obsidian, and a roar that resonated with an almost human timbre. Temple carvings from Napata to Meroë depict this majestic figure standing sentinel over tombs and temples, its paw resting protectively on the shoulders of kings. But was this a flesh and blood animal elevated to mythic status, or something far more enigmatic? A symbol woven into the very fabric of Nubian spirituality. The evidence for a real biological basis is surprisingly compelling. Ancient Nubia's ecosystem differed dramatically from today's arid landscape. Fossil records show the region once supported a subspecies of lion with notably darker pigmentation, possibly an adaptation to the dense acacia woodlands that once flourished along the Nile's banks. A 19th-century naturalist's journal describes a pelt traded from a Nubian elder, its fur near black with silver-tipped guard hairs, a description matching genetic mutations found in modern captive populations like the rare black-phase lions of Zimbabwe. Even more telling are the burial sites of several Nubian kings, where archaeologists have uncovered lion bones stained with ritual dyes, suggesting ceremonial reverence for actual animals. Yet the Black Lion's legend transcends zoology. In Nubian cosmology, darkness wasn't associated with evil as in Western traditions, but with fertility, mystery, and the fertile black silt of the Nile. The lion's nocturnal coloration linked it to Anubis, the jackal-headed psychopomp, and Mehit, the lioness goddess of war, deities who guarded the threshold between life and death. This wasn't just animal worship, it was a sophisticated metaphor for kingship itself. When a candidate queen was depicted wearing a cloak of black lion skin, she wasn't merely showcasing hunting prowess, she was channeling the beast's role as protector of sacred spaces. The supernatural accounts, however, defy easy classification. A Greek merchant scroll from the 2nd century BC recounts how his caravan took shelter in a ruined temple, only to awaken to find their stolen goods neatly stacked at the entrance, surrounded by paw prints larger than any mortal lions. Similar tales persist in Nubian oral histories, where the black lion appears as a judge of character, sparing starving travelers who respect holy sites while supposedly mauling tomb robbers. The most chilling detail: multiple sources describe the creature leaving no physical traces after these encounters, its prints vanishing abruptly as if it stepped back into the spirit world. Modern excavations add layers to the mystery. At the Temple of Apodamak in Naka, a relief shows the black lion with solar rays emanating from its body, a motif typically reserved for gods, not animals. Beneath this carving, archaeologists found a hidden chamber containing an altar stained with iron oxide and myrrh, substances ancient Nubians believed could fix divine energy in physical form. Was this a temple where priests ritually channeled the lion's essence? Or perhaps more intriguingly, does it hint at a forgotten practice of ceremonial garb where priests donned black lion pelts to embody the deity during sacred rites? The black lion's legacy endures in Sudan today. Desert nomads still speak of glimpsing a shadowy feline near abandoned temples during solar eclipses, while conservationists debate whether relic populations of dark-maned lions might still prowl remote wadis. Science may never prove the existence of a literal supernatural lion, but that misses the point. In Nubia's worldview, the boundary between symbol and reality was always fluid. The black lion wasn't just an animal or an idea. It was a living expression of the land's untamed soul, a reminder that some truths lurk forever in the threshold between daylight and darkness, waiting to be seen only by those who know how to look. High above the ancient city of Meroë, where the desert sky stretches endlessly, early explorers made a discovery that rewrote our understanding of Nubian ingenuity, an artifact so precise it seemed to defy the era from which it came. The so-called clockwork stars of Meroë weren't just celestial decorations. They formed what some researchers believe was a sophisticated astronomical device, a mechanical model of the heavens that could predict eclipses and track planetary movements centuries before similar mechanisms appeared in Europe. At the heart of this mystery lies a collection of bronze fragments unearthed in 1936 by a British archaeologist working near the ruins of the Royal Baths. Among broken pottery and faded murals, his team uncovered a series of interlocking gears, some no larger than a fingernail, etched with markings that mirrored constellations visible only from the southern hemisphere. The most startling find was a segmented disc with precisely spaced holes along its rim, a feature eerily reminiscent of the Antikythera mechanism, that famed Greek computer used to calculate astronomical positions. But here's what sets the Meroë artifacts apart. Carbon dating places them at least 200 years earlier than their Mediterranean counterpart, and the craftsmanship suggests a design philosophy entirely distinct from Hellenistic models. Not everyone accepts this interpretation. skeptics argue the fragments could be remnants of an ornate water clock or even decorative elements from a royal chariot. Yet one detail defies simple explanation. When researchers at the University of Khartoum reconstructed the largest gear fragment using three-dimensional printing, they discovered its tooth ratio produced a rotation period matching Venus's synodic cycle, the exact time it takes for the planet to return to the same position in Earth's sky. This wasn't just random engineering, it was deliberate celestial mimicry. The Nubians' relationship with the stars lends credence to the astronomical theory. Temple walls across Meroë feature detailed zodiacs that include constellations unrecognized by contemporary Egyptian or Babylonian astronomers, suggesting an independent tradition of sky watching. One particularly striking mural at the Temple of Apodamak depicts the five wanderers Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, with orbital paths marked by dotted lines that align with the gear ratios found in the fragments. Even more compelling are the accounts of Roman historian Pliny the Elder, who wrote of Nubian priests using a wheel that speaks the language of the night to determine auspicious dates for planting and warfare. But how could a civilization often overshadowed by its northern neighbors achieve such mechanical sophistication? The answer might lie in Meroë's unique position as a crossroads of knowledge. Excavations have revealed workshops where Nubian metalworkers produced steel alloys using techniques that wouldn't appear in Europe for another millennium. These artisans, masters of precision casting, could have easily adapted their skills to create intricate gearing. Recent scans of unfinished gear fragments show file marks consistent with the use of measuring templates, proof that these weren't one-off curiosities but products of a standardized craft. The greatest enigma isn't the device's existence but its disappearance. No complete mechanism survives, and later Nubian records make no mention of it. Some scholars speculate the knowledge was lost during the kingdom's decline, preserved only in coded star charts passed down through secret priestly lineages. Others propose a more dramatic fate, that the final device was dismantled and its parts buried as sacred offerings when Christianity spread through Nubia in the 6th century. A tantalizing clue supports this theory. Beneath the floor of a converted church at Faras, archeologists found a small bronze gear carefully wrapped in linen, placed beside a cross as if to sanctify both traditions. What makes the clockwork stars more than just an archaeological oddity is what they reveal about Nubian cosmology. Unlike Greek models that separated the mechanical from the divine, Nubian inscriptions suggest their astronomers saw no contradiction between gears and gods. A recovered prayer fragment asks the moon goddess Amsemi to guide the turning of the wheels, implying the device wasn't just a tool but a sacred intermediary between earth and sky. Modern attempts to reconstruct the complete mechanism continue to spark debate. A 2020 collaboration between Sudanese and German engineers produced a functional model capable of predicting lunar phases with 94% accuracy. But whether this reflects the original's true complexity remains uncertain. Perhaps the full truth lies still buried beneath Meroë's sands, waiting for some future explorer to piece together these celestial fragments into a clearer picture of Nubia's lost scientific triumphs. Until then, the clockwork stars stand as a testament to human curiosity, proof that even in antiquity, there were those who sought not just to watch the heavens but to hold their rhythms in their hands. The twilight of Nubia's golden age birthed one of its most haunting legends, the last spell of the vanishing sorcerers. As foreign armies pressed at their borders and temples crumbled into dust, the kingdom's mystics were said to have gathered in secret beneath the pyramids of Meroë. There, with dwindling torches casting shadows like grasping hands, they wove a final incantation not to save their civilization, but to ensure its memory would outlast the sands. The details vary across village storytellers, but one thread remains constant. The spell bound Nubia's essence into the land itself, cursing any who sought to erase its legacy with visions, whispers, and an inexplicable pull to uncover what had been buried. Consider the account of a 19th-century treasure hunter who stumbled upon an underground chamber near Napata. His journal describes finding 7 skeletal figures seated in a circle, their bony fingers still clasping rusted bronze bowls filled with a blackened residue. When he disturbed the arrangement, his team reportedly suffered weeks of shared nightmares, visions of a lion-headed figure, repeating a phrase linguists later translated as "you carry us now." Even more chilling are modern reports from archaeologists who have worked at these sites. A survey team in 2012 documented identical equipment malfunctions across multiple dig sites, cameras failing only when pointed at certain hieroglyphs, drones losing GPS signals over specific ruins, as if some ancient firewall still flickered to life. The psychological power of this myth lies in its historical roots. During Nubia's decline in the 4th century CE, Coptic monks recorded encounters with pagan wise men who foretold their own disappearance but promised the stones will speak when the hour comes. These weren't idle threats. Recent studies of Nubian temple acoustics reveal how certain chambers amplify specific frequencies to induce trance states, suggesting the spell might have been a final act of psychoacoustic engineering. Priests could have encoded messages in the very architecture, waiting for future generations to trigger them unwittingly. Perhaps most poignant is how the legend mirrors Nubia's historical trajectory. Just as the sorcerer's curse ensured their culture couldn't be forgotten, Nubian influence persisted long after its political fall. Elements of its spirituality seeped into early Christianity along the Nile. Its artistry inspired Coptic designs, and its agricultural techniques sustained communities through droughts that toppled mightier empires. The curse wasn't supernatural, it was the indelible mark of a civilization too vibrant to vanish. Nowhere is this more evident than in Sudan today, where farmers still avoid plowing certain fields for fear of awakening old words, and children's games include chants unintentionally preserving fragments of old Nubian. The real last spell wasn't magic, it was memory, stubborn and unyielding. Every time a scholar deciphers a forgotten inscription or a villager recounts a half-remembered legend, the sorcerer's work continues. Their final act wasn't destruction, but transformation, ensuring that, even in ruin, Nubia would never truly die. So the next time you hear the wind humming through temple ruins or catch a glint of gold where no sunlight falls, remember, some silences aren't empty. They're listening, and in Nubia, even the stones have stories left to tell. From the cursed pyramids whispering with phantom voices to the immortal queen who defied time itself, Nubia's 25 most baffling myths reveal far more than ancient superstitions. They're a vibrant tapestry of human ingenuity, fear, and wonder. Each story, whether rooted in celestial phenomena like the sky serpent or psychological mastery like the mirror of truth, reflects a civilization that thrived at the crossroads of reality and legend. These weren't just tales to entertain, they were tools for survival, frameworks for understanding a world where the Nile could turn to blood and statues might whisper prophecies. The giants who built monuments, the sorcerers who bound their legacy into the land, the archer who still walks the dunes. These legends endure because they capture something universal, our need to explain the unexplainable, to find meaning in the shadows of the past. What's truly remarkable is how many of these myths resist easy dismissal. The clockwork stars of Meroë challenge our assumptions about ancient technology, while the haunted mines force us to confront the human cost of empire. Even the most fantastical stories, like the shape-shifting priests or the Golden Crocodile, often contain kernels of truth, whether it's ritual hallucinogens, lost treasures, or ecological disasters transformed into divine warnings. Nubia's genius lay in weaving these threads into a cultural fabric so resilient that millennia later, we're still tugging at its seams, unraveling mysteries that refuse to stay buried. Now it's your turn. Which of these 25 myths lingers in your imagination? Is it the phantom army marching under the desert moon, or the forbidden library waiting beneath the sands with its dangerous knowledge? Drop your favorite in the comments and speculate. Could there be truth behind the legend? Perhaps you've heard local variations passed down through generations, or maybe you've got a theory about the Black Lion's true nature. Every discussion, every shared wonder keeps Nubia's legacy alive. After all, that's the real magic of mythology. It's never just about the past. It's about the stories we choose to carry forward and the mysteries we're still brave enough to chase. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the most extraordinary truths begin as whispers